want to do is just to see what does it look like. Okay, how does it lay out? What is the layout of an item of Q type when we look at the columns? So that's all we are going to do. We'll define a local variable that I will call Q, which is of the type Q, and I better do one thing about it, right? So I will say I want to go to Q, I want to go to items, and I want to access, let's say, the second element of items as a component of Q. And I try to make it 0. That's all. So once again, we have a really useless subroutine other than for the demonstration of the concepts. Okay. So we take a look at the trace. And the first part of the trace, once again, is not really that complicated. The line number starts with 3. There's nothing to say. Then we start execution on line 10. When we execute line 10, we have to set up the additional columns. Return line number, once again, is post because there's nothing after line 10. That's the easy part. And now we have a single local variable called Q, Q-U-E-U-E, that is of the type Q, which is uppercase Q. So what does it look like? Well, let's see. We have a Q, and Q has 3 components. The first component of Q, which is of the record type Q, is items. But items by itself is an array of 4 things. So now we have Q dot items, and if you want it to be really, really detailed, we have Q dot items bracket 0, Q dot items bracket 1, Q dot items bracket 2, Q dot items bracket 3. That takes up 4 columns. The next column is going to be used for the head index, and then the next column is going to be used by size. All of these have unknown values because we are dealing with a local variable. And I just want to make sure that we can see all of these all at the same time, which means I have to maximize the screen and shrink the display a little bit to show you what it looks like. Is that making any sense? When we look at Q as one single item, it has 3 components. The 3 components will be items, head index, and size. Now, technically speaking, if I want to be consistent, I should also write down Q dot something for all of these. It just makes it very long. Okay. So when you look at what is a Q in this case consumes everything from column C all the way up to column H. It has 3 components. The first component is items, the second component is head index, and the last component is size. The first component, called items, by itself is an array, and the array has 4 elements: bracket 0, bracket 1, bracket 2, and bracket 3. So are we doing okay with how we break it down into individual items? So if I want to just execute the statement here, which is changing items 1 to a 0, we just look it up. Q.items bracket 1 is this guy. We change it to a 0 in which line? Line 8. So we go to line 8, and that's the effect of line 8. It changes a single column even though Q consumes 6 columns to begin with. And then we go to line 9. Line 9 is the end of the main subroutine, and this time we have this many columns to deallocate, like that. And we are done. We go continue execution at post, which is the end of the trace. So are we doing okay as far as the structure is concerned when we combine arrays and records? Okay. when we come back on Tuesday, we will continue with what we call a queue here, and then we'll figure out certain things we can do with a queue. Okay, which is a very good example of how to use records and arrays and how to combine those concepts into one. Okay. Are there any other questions before we leave? No questions? Well, happy Thanksgiving, and I'll see you guys on Tuesday. Hopefully nobody has any stomach ache here because of Thanksgiving.